hi, a very happy good evening. So this is Krishna Ma'am and we're talking about the story of life on earth, and that's biology. So here we are in the final revision series. So today we're going to talk about the third chapter that is in 𝐷, that is plant kingdom. So plant kingdom and animal kingdom are a bit of twisted chapters where students really don't prefer, or students do not really have an affinity to read these chapters. So they'll be like, oh ma'am, this chapter has a lot of examples and all, but yeah, but ultimately these two chapters are very important. So I'll give you a quick revision of this chapter so that you'll be able to do your self-revision based on this. So I will also highlight where, what are the parts you have to do last minute revision. So what are the parts you have to actually pay attention last minute, right? So that is all we are going to discuss in today's lecture. So let's finish off plant kingdom today. So it's going to be a very easy topic. Yeah. So what are we going to discuss under plant kingdom? So I'm going to introduce to you the types of classification today. So what are the different types you have, right, in plant kingdom, or before plant kingdom was classified? So what are the different things that came into picture, and then on what basis your plant kingdom was classified, what was rejected, what was accepted? Because yesterday when we were reading about your biological classification, so we had 2 kingdom, we had 3 kingdom, 4 kingdom, so all were rejected based on one or the other principles, right? So similarly here we will see on what basis it was accepted, on what basis your plant kingdom was classified. So what are the members that comes under them, right? And then we'll be talking about the members in detail. So first is the algae, so then you have the bryophytes, pteridophytes, then you have the gymnosperms. Okay, yes. And finally angiosperms. So we'll not be dwelling much into the angiosperms because we'll be talking much more about angiosperms. So when we talk about sexual reproduction in flowering plants in in class 12th, okay? Alright, and lastly we'll end with plant life cycles. Right. So this was the types of classification that came into picture. So there are 5 types of classification, but 3 are main types. What are the 3 types of classification? So you have the artificial system, then you have the natural system, and the third one is the phylogenetic system. So an artificial system was proposed by Linnaeus, okay? So on the basis of morphological characters and vegetative characters. So on the basis of morphological characters is on the basis of your external appearance. What is vegetative characters? The vegetative parts of the plant include the root, stem and the leaf. So all this on this basis of the morphology and the vegetative character, your artificial system of classification came into being. But it was immediately rejected because here the vegetative and the sexual characters were given equal weightage. So how that is possible? So when a plant reproduces by flower and when a plant reproduces by vegetation, it cannot be the same, right? So this is ruled out. Okay, the next type of classification is the natural system of classification, and this was proposed by Bentham and Hooker. On what basis did they classify this natural system is based on the natural affinities of the external and the internal features considered, right? So they took into the natural affinities of a plant, like how it reacts to the environment. So what are the internal features that is important for a plant to survive, like your xylem and phloem? So what are the external features? So whether it has this type of phyllotaxy, this type of inflorescence, etc. So what were the other features? The internal features, it is listed here. So it talks about the ultra structure. Ultra is very, very small or very, very perfect. So minute depth we talk, that is ultra structure, anatomy, embryology and phytochemistry. Okay. The last one is your phylogenetic system. So this was proposed by Engel and Plantel. So this was based on the evolutionary relationship between various organisms. So here the organisms belonging to the same taxa have a same common ancestor. For example, we are all from descendants of the monkey, right? So that is your phylogenetic system of classification. So they say crocodiles and snakes are descendants of dinosaurs. So much in that way. So when you talk about the evolutionary ancestors, the roots, the origin, that is your phylogenetic system of classification. Fine? Yes? Okay. So these are the three main system of classification. So apart from that, we have other types of classification also. The first one is numerical. Numerical is numbers, right? So based on the observable characters. So each character is given equal importance here, and at a given time many number of characters can be considered. Okay, so that is your numerical classification. The next one is your cytotaxonomy. Cyto means cell. Okay, so it is based on the cytological information, the information of the cell. The chromosome number, the structure, behavior, etc. So based on all this, when you classify, it is cytotaxonomy. Okay. The last one is your chemotaxonomy, based on the chemical constituents, like which type of pigment, which type of alkaloid it has, all that constitutes your chemical taxonomy. Sorry, chemotaxonomy. So now, who are the members of your plant kingdom? So we have 5 members of your plant kingdom: algae, bryophytes, pteridophytes, gymnosperms and angiosperms. So these are the 5 members of your plant kingdom, right? So first we'll talk about algae. So we'll talk about algae. So we'll start with how we define algae. So we define algae as chlorophyll bearing. So let me tell you, fungi was not considered to be your fungi was not considered to be under your plant kingdom because it was completely heterotrophic, right? So that is the reason fungi was put under a separate kingdom, right? So here I will tell you, all the 5 members of your plant kingdom, they all have your chlorophyll bearing nature. So all 5 are your autotrophs. Okay, yes, right. So they are chlorophyll bearing, they are simple, thalloid. So thalloid is the body structure, it is the undifferentiated body structure. Okay, so they are autotrophic and they are largely aquatic beings. Fine? Yes? Okay. So the habitat is made up of moist stones, okay, soils and wood. So that is where they live, and they all can also live in association with lichens, that is with the fungi. What are the form and size? They are highly variable. They can take up any number of forms, like they can form colonies, that is volvox. They can be filamentous, that is Ulothrix and Spirogyrum. So how do they reproduce? They can reproduce by all the 3 methods: vegetative, sexual and asexual method. So by vegetative method, if they have to reproduce, that is fragmentation of the thallus. The body part is divided into so many pieces, and each piece can give you a new organism. Right? So asexual reproduction through spores. So the spores are zoospores, and these zoospores are flagellated. So sexual reproduction, fusion of 2 gametes. The 2 gametes can be flagellated or both can be non-flagellated. So this, I hope you remember, yesterday we read what is syngamy, anisogamy and oogamy. So based on that, you have certain examples. So isogamous, they can be flagellated, they are similar in size. Iso is same. Both can be flagellated, both can be non-flagellated. Example, Ulothrix, both are flagellated. Spirogyra, they are non-flagellated. Okay. Anisogamous, the 2 gametes are dissimilar in sizes. Example, Eudornia. Fine. Oogamous, one is non-motile, the other is motile. So that is volvox and fucus. So this tabular column is very important. So make sure you go through this tabular column. Fine. Yes. Okay, so we have three types of algae which we'll talk in this plant kingdom. So first of all, we have your green algae, chlorophyceae. Then it's 𝐕𝐴𝐴, that is brown algae, and rhodophyceae, that is red algae. So on what basis these algae are different? Based on the major pigments, based on the constituents of cell wall, and based on the storage food material. Fine? Okay. So your green algae has the pigment chlorophyll A and B. Okay. So the stored food here is starch. So basically it is pyrenoid. It is stored in the form of pyrenoid. The center portion of pyrenoid is your protein surrounded by starch. But basically the stored food enhances starch formation. The cell wall is made up of cellulose. Okay. So talking about your 𝐕𝐴𝐴, that is your brown algae, here your pigment is chlorophyll A, C or fucoxanthin, and here the stored food material is mannitol laminarian, and the cell wall is made up of cellulose and another substance called as algin. The third one is rhodophyceae, which is your red algae. It is made up of the pigment chlorophyll A and D. Also, it has your phycoerythrin. So, fucoxanthin is in your brown algae and phycoerythrin is in your red algae. So, the stored food material here is your Floridian starch. Alright? Yes? So, I have all the examples of the algae here, and there's an easy way to remember all the names here. Okay, so let's see how. So, green algae, chlorophyceae. So, the example is, so how do you remember the example is, we use soft creamy cheese, right? So, this includes your Chlamydomonas, your Volvox, your Eulothrix, Spirogyra and Chara, right? So, this is how you remember. So, brown algae is, dear friends, eat, learn and sleep. So, D is Dictyota, F is your Fucus, E is your Ectocarpus, L is your Laminaria, S is your Sargassum. Okay, right? Red algae, Polysymphona, Porphyra, Gracilaria, Gelidium. So, PG is to PG. So, usually in my slides, PG is pollen grain. So, remember pollen grains, you will be able to write. And apart from that, your green algae is very versatile. So, it can have very many forms of shape and structure. It is very variable. So, it can be unicellular, it can be multicellular, it can be in the form of colonies, it can be having multicellular thalloid. The body can be made up of multicellular beings. So, all that is mentioned here. So, I want you to go through. So, please at least take this slide for your last minute revision. This will be really helpful to you. Alright, yes? Okay, so algae, so what is the economic importance of algae? Algae fixes half of Earth's carbon dioxide. Okay, so it increases the level of dissolved oxygen because your red algae are mostly aquatic, so they increase the amount of dissolved oxygen. So they are of paramount importance because they are producers in the food chain. So your Porphyra, Laminaria, Sargassum, they are used as food for livestock, right? So Laminaria, Sargassum are brown algae, Porphyra is your red algae. So your marine brown algae and red algae, that is algene and carrageen, are used for as hydrocolloids. Then agar, which is obtained from Geladium and Gracilaria, they are used for growing microbes in lab. Yes ma'am, a very happy good evening. Thank you so much for joining my session today. So please do like, share and subscribe. So chlorella is one unicellular algae that has a lot of proteins and it can be used as supplements. So this was once a NEET question. Which of the following algae is rich in proteins? So your answer is chlorella. Okay. Right. So the next concept, the next member is bryophytes. So they live in shaded regions. Okay. So they are called as amphibians of plant kingdoms because they live normally on land. But for fertilization, they need the medium of water. Okay. So they're also known as sciophytes because they love being in shade. So that is why they are sciophytes. Okay. So the plant body here is more differentiated. They are thallus-like. So what do I mean by more differentiated? Compared to algae, they are more differentiated, but still they do not have leaf, stem and root. Okay. The thallus-like, they are prostrate and arrate. They are attached to the substratum by the unicellular and the multicellular thalloid. Right, but still they do lack true roots, stems or leaves. They are divided into three classes: liverworts, hornworts and mosses, but according to your textbook only liverworts and mosses are given. So liverworts, liver is called as hepatic, so it is 𝐻𝐵𝐵𝐻𝗵𝗃. So mosses are BRYOPHYTES, so we're going to talk about that. So how do you talk about, or what is the life cycle of your bryophyte? So when you talk about the life cycle in plant kingdom, there are two terms which you might come across. One is gametophyte and one is sporophyte. One is gametophyte, the other one is the sporophyte. So gametophyte is the one that is having haploid set of chromosomes. So sporophyte is the one that is having diploid set of chromosomes. Fine. So your bryophyte's main plant body is gametophyte. So they are gametophytes. Meaning they are haploid, right? So this gametophyte has the sex organs for the male, which is called as the antheridium and for the female, that is archegonium. So this produces the male gamete, that is the sperm, and this produces the female gamete, that is egg. So fertilization happens in water, right? So once the fertilization happens, the zygote is produced. So the zygote is diploid. So now this undergoes meiotic division to form spores. So spores are haploid. So these spores germinate to produce your haploid bryophytes. They germinate to produce your adult bryophytes. So this is the life cycle of your bryophyte, which I want you to remember. Fine? Okay. So moving forward, what is the importance of bryophyte? So under bryophytes, you have two. One is liverworts and one is mosses, which we saw. Right? So mosses provide food for herbaceous mammals like birds and other animals. So they are also again important in the tropic level. So species of sphagnum. So sphagnum is again a type of moss. It provides a particular fuel in the form of peat. So it can hold water molecules together. So mosses and lichens, so lichens are algae and fungi together, they first colonize the rocks. If you remember the chapter ecosystem in class 12, so we read about primary ecological succession and secondary ecological succession, right? So what do they ultimately mean? So primary ecological succession is the first life that came initially, right? So they are the first ones to colonize a bare area. They can also decompose rocks. Only when you decompose rocks, you get minerals, right? So mosses form dense mats on the soil. So they reduce the impact of soil rain and they also reduce soil erosion, right? So what are liverworts? Okay. So in liverworts, all that you have to remember is, so the example of liverworts is your Marchantia. Right? Okay. So this liverworts example is Marchantia. So they are thalloid. So they are not well developed, right? So sometimes they can undergo sexual reproduction as well as asexual reproduction. So they have they form a special structure called as gemma. So this is present inside the gemma cups. So this later grows into new individuals. Okay, the adult one can be differentiated into capsule, seta and foot, right? So talking about your mosses have two stages. The first stage is the proteinema stage, which directly arises from the spores, okay? So through asexual means, when the spore develops to form a bryophyte, so the proteinema forms. The second stage is the leafy stage. So leafy stage forms from the secondary protonema. So these are the two things that you have to remember here. Fine? Yes? Okay, coming to the next one, it is your pteridophytes. So member of pteridophytes include your horsetails and ferns. Just like in your bryophytes, we had your mosses and your liverworts. Here it is horsetails and ferns. Okay. So the use here is they are used for medicinal purposes. So they are soil binders, having ornamental plants. So whenever you go to big hotels, so you can see a plant that is lining the corridor, the corners of the stair walls. So that is all your pteridophytes. Okay. So uniqueness, it is the first terrestrial plant. So they are the first plant with the vascular system, that is xylem and phloem. They also prefer cold, damp and shaded regions, but not as much as bryophytes. So the plant design is that the main plant body is sporophyte. So in your bryophyte, it was gametophyte. Right? So here it was sporophyte. So this sporophyte is 2N. So this is differentiated into root, stem and leaf. So this is the first member which is having root, stem and leaf. So the leaves can be small. When it is small, it is microphyles. When it is big, it is macrophyles. So the small leaf example is Selaginella and the big one are your ferns. So life cycle of your pteridophyte. So here there's another twist. So main pteridophyte plant body is sporophyte, meaning it is 2N, right? So this sporophyte has your spore mother cell. This spore mother cell undergoes meiosis to form your spores. Right? So these spores, they germinate to form your prothallus. This prothallus is the gametophytic stage, meaning this is the haploid stage. But this prothallus is independent, it can be free living and also it is photosynthetic. So later this prothallus will have or will lead to the formation of the two sex organs, that is your antheridium and archegonium. So this will produce the male gamete. This will produce the female gamete. So this will fuse to form the zygote. Now the zygote will develop into the pteridophytes. So here the fertilization happens inside the female gamete. So this female gamete will only bear seeds. So the seeds can be dispersed and that is the basis of your seed habits. Done. This is about your pteridophytes. Alright. Right. So there are 4 classes of your pteridophytes. What are the 4 classes? So first is Coelopsida, the next one is your Lycopsida, the third one is your Cenopsida and the fourth one is Pteropsida. So Coelopsida, the example is very easy, Coelotum. If given and match the following, you can match these two. Lycopsida, Selaginella, Lycopodium. Lycopsida and Lycopodium you can easily match, but remember Selaginella also comes here. Cenopsida, Equisetum, this is your horsetail. Equisetum is your horsetail, equus is horse. Pteropsida, Dryopteris, Pteris, Adyanthum. So again, a Pteris and your Pteridopsida are both easy to mark, right? So your Dryopteris is your wood fern and your Adyanthum is your walking fern, right? So next one is your gymnosperms. The ovules are not enclosed by ovary wall and they remain exposed before and after fertilization. So in your textbook, gymnosperm talks about 2 trees, one is cycas and one is pinus. Okay, so cycas, see, it has coloroid roots. So coloroid roots means the roots which can fix nitrogen. Okay, Pinus has mycorrhiza roots which has association with fungi. They have unbranched stem, they have branched stem. They have pinnate leaves. I hope you remember pinnately compound and palmately compound, right? So they have needle-shaped leaves. So here the male and female are on different trees, but here they are on the same trees, okay? Right. So reproductive cycle of angiosperms, so just like we were talking about the life cycle of pteridophytes, we also have the life cycle of gymnosperms. So the gymnosperms are heterosporous, okay? So they produce haploid microspores and megaspores. So they have what is called as strobili, which holds your microsporophylls and microsporangia. So come on, don't get confused. So they have the female portion, the male portion is microspore. The male gamete here is microspore. The female gamete is megaspore. So this microspore is produced in a bag called as microsporangia. This microsporangia is present in a leaf-like structure called as microsporophylls. This microsporophylls is present in strobili. Fine. So that is how you remember it. So they produce the pollen grains, and similarly the megaspore mother cell. So similar to angiosperms, so here also you have nucellus which protects the ovule and it produces 4 megaspores. One megaspore is functional, so that is monosporic, so it gives rise to your new organism, right? Yes. So here the gametophytes do not have independent free living existence like your prothallus in your pteridophytes, right? So angiosperms, you know, it has embryo sac, and you know how the embryo sacs are formed, what is double fusion, what is endosperm, etc. So in gymnosperms, the endosperm is present before fertilization. In angiosperms, the endosperm is present after fertilization. Fine. The last one is alteration of generation. So we have 3 generations: haplontic, diplontic, haplodiplontic. Haplontic is only when they have N as their major phase, right? So only zygote is the 2N phase. Apart from that, they have no diploid phase. So example, Volvox, Spirogyra, and some species of Chlamydomonas, basically algae. Diplontic, so here the major phase is the sporophyte. Gymnosperms, angiosperms, they have the haploid phase when the gametes are formed. Haplodiplontic, when they have both the phases equally, your bryophytes and your pteridophytes. In your bryophytes, the haploid phase is dominant, or the first one. In your pteridophytes, it's the diploid phase, that is the first one, right? So with this, we are done with a quick revision of plant kingdom. So this life cycle, alteration in the life cycles of plant is very important. So this tabular column you will go through the day before exam or on the day of exam. So it is a must for the final round of revision. Alright, yes. Okay, so it's my humble request. So I have already forwarded to you in Telegram group if you are a part of that. So please watch this video on heat pox. So what is this heat pox? So know more about it, right? And again, I have told you, so if you want to know what is the atmosphere of quota coaching, so please join us on 8th of June at from 3 p.m. onwards in the CP Tower. So we have our motivational guru sharing 6.5 mantras for success. It is also an opportunity to know what is quota like and how is the coaching, what is the student life here. So please join us. Even parents are cordially invited. You can bring your parents along with you. So if you genuinely like my sessions, so please don't forget to like, share and subscribe. So tomorrow at 5:30 we'll be discussing about animal kingdom, and on Saturday in the morning you have a Menti quiz on all the chapters that we discussed this week. So hope you enjoy my session. So I will meet you tomorrow at 5:30 with animal kingdom, right? So until then, this is me signing off. So stay tuned and thank you. Bye guys.